Quantitative easing is a completely lunatic program that is interestingly not very well known here in America. You remember when Barack Obama had his $800 billion stimulus package, which was ostensibly intended to create jobs, there was uproar all across the country that this is socialism and how could we do this, just the government giving money away. Well, that was actually real money that existed, that $800 billion that they spent ostensibly creating jobs. Quantitative easing was a program where the Federal Reserve did like an I Dream of Jeannie thing and like invented out of thin air now $2 trillion essentially to buy T-bills and mortgage-backed securities and artificially prop up Wall Street. And this is money that didn't even exist, and they simply were pumping it into the financial bloodstream so that Wall Street could stay alive a little bit longer. It's a completely insane program. There's a reason why you can't just print money and get yourself out of economic trouble that way. There's a tremendous inflationary danger here, but they're doing it anyway, which speaks to the total desperation and craziness of our current economy. Absolutely, she's going to run for president in 2012, and I don't think she's going to win, but I think she's a very good bet to win the nomination. I think what we saw in the last election was the Tea Party is now in this king-making role in the Republican Party. I don't think they can nominate anybody who isn't acceptable to the Tea Party. That person is just not going to win enough primaries to get through. And Sarah Palin is a candidate who's acceptable to the Tea Party. She's also, and I've seen this personally, I've covered her in person. She's a gifted politician just in terms of getting people to connect with her on an emotional level in person. It's something that if you're an experienced campaign journalist, you could just see these, it's like watching Michael Jordan in person. You can just see that they have it, and she's got it, and I think she's going to win the nomination. It was really funny. I was in a rally that Sarah Palin was holding in Kentucky, and she was doing the whole Ronald Reagan business. Government is never the answer. Government is always the problem. It's never the solution. And it was a crowd of 10,000 people at a gospel singing convention. But it was, first of all, an entirely white crowd. There wasn't a single black face there, and mostly elderly. And while she was doing the speech, I suddenly looked around and I noticed that like 1 out of every 4 people in the crowd was either on an oxygen tank or in one of those scooters, those motorized wheelchairs. And I asked the person, one of the reporters next to me, what's the deal with the scooters? And they're like, oh, there's commercials on TV here. You don't even have to pay for them because if you have Medicare, it's for free. And so I started interviewing these people afterwards, and all these people are on scooters. They're all on Medicare. And yet they're railing against government spending and socialism. And here's the thing with the Tea Party. A lot of these people have this idea of good welfare and bad welfare. Like bad welfare is for like immigrants and minorities, and it's for people who are lazy and don't really need it. Good welfare is for people who are just temporarily in a jam or who've worked their whole lives and now they're retired and now they just need a little lift. They just genuinely don't see the problem with this kind of thinking. That's a problem that every journalist has to worry about. I think in my case, I have a little bit of a luxury that other journalists don't have, which is that I'm not covering the same people over and over and over again. If I want to, I can cover a story and move on to a completely different topic afterwards and never have to deal with any of those people again. So I can actually do that scorch and burn thing where I descend on a whole bunch of people and write whatever I want about them, and if it's not flattering, I don't ever have to talk to them again. That's not the situation that some journalists are in. If you're covering the White House for the Washington Post, well, you have to nurture those relationships, and you can't burn people all the time. So I venture a little bit more in the direction of just saying what I think is appropriate and letting the chips fall where they may. But at the same time, you have to be fair to your sources. Otherwise, no one will ever talk to you. If you get a reputation as somebody who violates off-the-record privileges, for instance, nobody's going to talk to you. So I work hard to be, honest with my sources, but I don't go out of my way to make them feel good either. One of the reasons I was so attracted to this Wall Street story was when I first started looking at it in the summer of 2008. I was continually struck by how much it reminded me of a lot of the dynamic that I had seen covering the Russian government and the Russian state, where there was this, the oligarchical system that they had over there. There was a very tiny collection of super connected industrial figures, these oligarchs. They were bankers mostly, and there was this circular process of government gives tons of money to banker, banker then scams the public and returns money to politicians, who in turn keep giving money back to the bankers. And that whole circular process is very similar to what's going on here in the States now, where we have, a small group of very, very politically connected banks who give massive campaign contributions to both parties, and they're rewarded with selective regulation and bailouts, and then the money comes back again. I think if I hadn't seen that in the more crude form that you see in Russia, where stuff is just right out in the open in Russia sometimes, they don't even really hide it. If I hadn't seen that, it would have been harder for me to see, this story. If you live life like there's no tomorrow, actually it doesn't work, because ultimately there is a tomorrow. That's one of the things you learn if you do that long enough. You can't. You do eventually have to plan and be smart and not be nuts but I think there's a time and a place for every life strategy. I think in the 20s, the way I lived in the 20s, which was really without a whole lot of planning and more just seeking experience for the sake of it, and that was appropriate then. It wouldn't be appropriate at this time in my life. So, I don't have any regrets. I think that's kind of the way to go. Is, live hard and let's see what happens in the end. This is a very public life that I'm leading now, which I wasn't prepared for. When I was doing this for most of my life, writing is a very solitary profession. I got into it because I loved, just the process of creating something and writing, and I never ever thought about my whole life and personality being out in public and what people might think of me as a person and all that. And it's very nerve-wracking, that whole situation. I worry that I'm gonna hurt somebody with my writing. I've had a couple of close shaves where I've written some things that may have done damage to the people in my stories, and that freaks me out an awful lot. And so I worry about being wrong more than anything. I think every time I write a story, I always hold my breath and worry that, did I hit somebody unfairly in this piece, or is it going to come back that I got something completely wrong? And that, I think that's the thing I worry about the most.